For today's review, we are looking at Lex Luthor. Not one, but two of them. And the reason why I'm doing this review style again is because in this case, it saves me a lot of trouble from having to separate them into two reviews when I'm going to be comparing the differences and the similarities throughout this entire video. So I might as well just cover both of them in the same review. And with that said, before I dive into talking about the accessories and the figures, let's take a quick look at the data profile cards that are included. And as you can see, they are using action figure photography once again for the photos, which I really love seeing. And for this photo here, you do have Luthor in his green and purple armor suit, looking menacing as he's standing there. And for this photo, he is sitting on a throne with a mother box behind him, which would have been awesome if this was an accessory that he actually came with. Now, in terms of the source material, this one is from the New 52, and this one is from Justice League, the Darkseid War. As for the back of the card, the read-ups are pretty much the same, except for this one here, where the other half actually includes details to explain why he looks the way he does in this version. So let's start with, of course, the normal Lex Luthor that we are familiar with, and learn who he is as a character. His real name is Alexander Lex Luthor, and it reads, "A brilliant businessman and inventor, billionaire Lex Luthor once saw himself as the most powerful man on Earth until Superman arrived. Rather than using his wealth and genius to help humanity, Luthor uses his gifts in repeated attempts to destroy the Man of Steel. Though he's often defeated, Luthor is an extremely dangerous foe, and his superior intellect is his deadliest weapon. He is constantly inventing new devices in his war against Superman, including his high-tech armored power suit, which he uses to battle Superman." And that's a pretty good read-up on who Luthor is as a character. Now, to explain why he looks the way he does in the blue version, the other half reads, "But after the death of Darkseid in the Darkseid War, Luthor absorbs the tyrannical ruler's incredible power and leaves Metropolis for Apocalypse. Upon arrival, Luthor creates a new power suit, one emblazoned with Superman's S-shield on its chest, and becomes the new god of Apocalypse." So I've never read this particular comic, so I don't know what happens in the story, but that sounds really cool. Yeah, the fact that he basically becomes the new Darkseid, right? So, but there you have it, the read-ups for both of these data profile cards. Moving on into accessories, let's start with the green power suit first. So he comes with two interchangeable hands. You have a single open gesture hand for the right arm, and you have an item holding hand for the left arm. As for the two hands that are equipped to the figure, you do have a item holding hand for the right arm, and a single fist hand for the left arm. For the blue power suit version, you don't get any interchangeable hands. Instead, you get this throne accessory for the figure to sit on. And for a figure that was once $20 when this came out a few years ago, seeing this accessory is wild, because I didn't think that I would ever get an action figure that will come with a chair, because this is like a rare thing to see with a lot of action figures these days. Sometimes you don't even get accessories. And then sometimes when you do get accessories, it's like the bare minimum. But in this case, they were like, you know what? If we're not going to give you the bare minimum of interchangeable hands, we'll just give you this chair for him to sit on, which I thought this chair would raise the cost of this figure because, you know, sometimes certain companies do charge extra when they include something like this. So, yeah, but in this case, surprisingly, Mcfarlane did not do that. And also, the disappointment I have with this throne is the fact that the plastic quality is also not great. So, outside of these nice texturing work that they did to the details for some parts of the throne, which I do like how it came out because it kind of feels like rock material, even though it's not actually rock. Most of this throne, unfortunately, is very lightweight. There is no weight to it. It's pretty much a very cheap feeling plastic. So, as you can see, like this area right here where he sits, they could have added more details there, right? But instead, it's just like a flat surface. And then for the back of the throne, it is a very ugly looking backside. You're not going to ever display this throne showing the backside anyways, but it would have been nice if they filled it in with the same sort of details that you see on the front, so it feels like a very complete sculpted throne. And for the bottom side, you can see that it's hollow plastic inside, so there's no closed part for the bottom, which sucks. So yeah, even though it is nice that he comes of a throne, I don't like the fact that the quality itself is really bad. And also the seam line in the middle here is also very ugly. They could have found a way to sculpt this where they didn't have to do a seam line that goes, directly into the center here. So, and it also doesn't really align correctly. It kind of aligns correctly, but you get my point. So that's pretty much the differences when it comes to the accessories for both of these figures. And now, moving on into aesthetics, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to talk about each figure independently before I do up-close comparisons of the similarities and the differences. So let's start with the green suit version first and take a look at the details that are present on the figure. So one thing I'll say right away is that I remember when this figure came out a long time ago, and when they showed the details and the sculpted textures that were present throughout the entire action figure, I was very impressed by how this looked, because you don't see stuff like this all the time. Sometimes certain action figures that are based on comic book designs, they just use a very flat surface, a very flat sort of design, where they don't add all this stuff in here. But for his power suit, I really like the fact that they added all these details in here. Now, I don't know what he looks like in the New 52 version, because I haven't read most of the New 52 comics. But if his power suit looks exactly like this, then they did a really good job with the details, because all of this is present. Now, one thing that is kind of a problem with these two figures, however, which I do want to point out, is that even though all the details are good, all the sculpted stuff is there, the paint details is pretty much what is lacking with both of these figures. So for the green paint that they used, it's very plasticky, as you can see, right? And there are a lot of these sculpted battle damage marks. So this is like one of those cases where if you are a customizer, you are definitely going to add more paint details into some of these areas that probably could use it so that it can stand out. And I really like the fact that you do have his sort of power core in the middle that usually would have the L logo on there to represent LexCorp and all that stuff. But in this case, it doesn't really look like it says LexCorp. It just is a power core in the center of his torso. And all these little tiny details that are connected to this power core, I like how all of that is sculpted. And then when you get into this purple area, you just see all these tech stuff, like wires and all the usual details, and I do like how that is present there. And then when you get to the bottom of his legs, this is what I like the most here. You start to see how the purple and the green mix together, right? You have details here in his waist parts, and then down here by his legs, you have these sculpted details for the upper parts of his thighs, mixed in with these armor pieces that are on the side here that runs down to the bottom of his legs. And one thing that's kind of cool here is that even though, pins are not the best, because I know a lot of people don't like action figures with pins. They prefer pinless. This is one of those cases where the pins actually blend in with his power suit. Well, mainly for his legs. For his arms, you can make a little debate here of whether that should be pinless or not. But for his legs, the pins do match up with his little armor sort of look down here, which I do like. So yeah, it's not a bad way of trying to hide the pins or blend it in with the sculpt. So in this case, it works. Now, when you get to the bottom of his legs, though, you can see more of this green detail that is not painted, right? It's very flat. It feels like it could use a little bit more paint details down here. But nevertheless, I do like all the battle damage scar marks that are visible in the sculpt. So yeah, his details that are present on this armor is pretty cool. So this is like the front side. And then for his arms up here, let's talk about that as well. You do have more of this sort of like sculpting that is similar to his legs here for the upper thighs. And you can see more of this purple detail that is up here. And of course the pins are visible. But I guess even for the arms, the pins are kind of blend in with the suit design. So it doesn't look too off. And then for his gauntlet or armor piece right here, whatever you want to call this, it is similar to his leg armor down here with the shape of the design. So that's pretty cool. And again, those battle damage marks are just nice to see. Even if they're not painted, it's cool that they're present. So it's the same thing for this side of the arm as well. Now, for the back side of the figure, you do have details here. You have this sort of spinal design that is meant to show the spine of his armor, which is really cool. You have more details that are up here where his collar piece or his, whatever you want to call this, that covers his neck, right? The back part of his neck. So that's pretty cool that all of this is there. But again, look at how all of these details are just left unpainted. It would be so cool if they were just painted and filled in. But yeah, so a lot of these details are pretty good. They're nicely sculpted, and I really like that about this figure a lot. And last but not least, let's talk about the head sculpt of this Lex Luthor figure. I really like the way that the sculpting of his face came out, because it looks like what Lex Luthor looks like in the comic books as he walked out of those comic pages. Now, the one thing I dislike here, which is quite obvious what that is, are those side eyes. This figure was released in the same period as Superboy Prime, so that was during this whole period where they love giving these figures side eyes for some reason, even though they never bothered to give them alternate head sculpts. And the crazy part about this is that this is the only comic book Lex Luthor that we have that's in the green and purple power suit from this line. He has not made any other version of Lex based on his other designs that is wearing, of course, the same color, of course. I'm not talking about, like, these one-off versions here. I'm talking about straight up, like, Lex Luthor in this color based on a different source material. So, yeah, being that this is the only Lex Luthor figure that we have in this line where he's in these traditional colors of his power suits, it would have been nice if he had an alternate head sculpt, but sadly, that is not the case here. And that's pretty much all the aesthetics for this green power suit version, as you can see. And now, moving on to the blue power suit version. This one is where a lot of the colors pretty much disappear. So, with the other version, you can see like the contrast of colors in a lot of areas. That makes it pop. It makes it stand out more. But for this blue suited version, the unfortunate thing here is that a lot of the blue parts are pretty much painted the same way throughout the entire body, which is not great, because if you want color contrast on this armor, you're going to have to add those color contrasts yourself. In this case, they could have made some of the blue areas a little bit darker, right? Just for the sake of making them look a little bit different. But the fact that most of it is the same color blue pretty much makes this version feel very limited in the colors. And it just seems very bland, as I would like to say, because, look at the backside, for example, right? It's all blue. So there's that. But in terms of the areas that are newly sculpted, let's just put it this way, that is different from the other version, you do have his S emblem logo here in the center. And as you can see, the torso is not the same, right? It's a little bit different from the other version. He does have these shoulder armor pads here that covers the top part of his arms. And there are also different pieces as well. They are a softer plastic. For his head sculpt, it is a very different head sculpt. He has that more Darkseid looking head sculpt, since he did take Darkseid's powers, right? So you can see how the dome of his head is very similar to how Darkseid looks when he has that sort of shape. So I do like the details of his head sculpt. And because he doesn't have pupils in his eyes, as you can see, he doesn't have the side eyes problem. So most of the time you can assume that he's probably looking straight at you or looking to the side, however you want to envision his eyes to be. But they are very interesting looking eyes indeed, because they're all white and then it's surrounded by like this black outline that I guess these are his eyebrows, but down here it's like some shadow, maybe. I think that's what that's supposed to be. As for his legs down here, they are the same legs, of course, and this part is actually painted this time. So compared to the green version, where this sort of sculpt here is not painted, this one is actually painted in red. And as you can see, the legs are exactly the same, right? Like all those details are the same. All the battle damage marks are also the same, which is really cool. I do like that aesthetic. For his arms, he does have a different sort of armor piece here. It's not the same as this piece down here. It does have this red border. You do have some of these details. You also have his hands painted with that same red outline. It's the same thing on this side. And yeah, that's pretty much like some of the differences like on this version, right? And then for his upper neck area, you do have this part right here that covers his neck, right, to protect him, but it's not as large as the other one that is on his shoulders. And on the back side, you do have the same details with the spine sort of thing for the back part of his suit. You do have more of these other details that were present on the other one, but overall, really cool figure. I do like the aesthetics here. Again, there's not much to talk about because, as you can see, since this is the best part to segment into showing the differences up close, they pretty much share a lot of parts because they were released at the same time. So this body buck was heavily reused for these two figures, which makes sense because for a company, whenever they make a new body buck, you're going to reuse it for another figure right away. And in this case, they were like, you know what? Since we're releasing this Luthor, might as well release this Luthor as well back to back so then we can make use of this body buck. And overall, details, texture, all that stuff, they did a really good job. And that's going to wrap it up for the aesthetics portion, as I've shown you what the differences and similarities are between these two figures. And now it's time we talk about the articulation, because this is where certain parts of these figures are a little bit different when it comes to how they move their articulation. So let's start with the green power suit. For his head sculpt, as you can see, he can look up. So if you want to get him into a fly pose, you can. However, because of those side eyes, he's going to be looking off to the side all the time. When it comes to looking down, he can look down without any problems, so that's good. Turn his head left and right, no problem. Tilt his head, no problems there. As for his shoulder here, as you can see, there's no shoulder piece hanging down. His arms can spread up this far and also go up this high, so that's pretty good. In terms of the other version here, let's start with his head sculpt. He can't really look up exactly the best because of the fact that this helmet behind his head gets in the way. It does hinder the neck articulation from allowing him to look up if you want to get him into a fly pose. When it comes to looking down, he can look down better than the other version. For this part of his arms, when it comes to getting his arms out, they do go up pretty good because of the fact that the armor piece here is a softer plastic. However, you do want to be careful because it could pop off if you're not careful, and you can break that soft plastic. So that is pretty much the differences between the head sculpts. This one doesn't have the best when it comes to looking up. So for a fly pose, not the best right here. Now on to the torso. The torso area is pretty much the same for both of these figures. So he does have this really good rotation here. He can't really lean forward because that is a problem with this one where they didn't carve out enough room. So leaning forward is not great. Leaning back is also not the greatest either, which is interesting. So once again, this is one of those cases where we have yet again another DC Multiverse figure that can't lean forward or back in the best way. As for his waist articulation, he does move pretty good down here. He can lean back a little bit. Again, not the greatest, and leaning forward is also not the greatest. Now, one thing that they did with this figure that was very different from every other DC Multiverse figure we got up to this point, at this point of time, of course, when this figure came out, was the fact that this waist piece right here was changed to a softer plastic. So if you remember my Batman Beyond review, that was when they were still using hard plastic for these waist areas. So the legs being able to kick out was a problem for some figures. In this case, look at how good the kick is because of the fact that this is soft. Now, it does run into the sculpt of this top part here, which does cause problems. But nevertheless, if you're trying to get him to kick somebody, that's a really good kick. If you're trying to get him to do the splits, he can do pretty much almost a full split. That is a full split, I would say, for an action figure right there. So that's pretty good. And then for his legs, he does have the double jointed articulation. As you can see, he does have, movement down here with the feet. And of course, swivel and toe articulation. Now, the reason why they made it this soft was because since one of these figures technically sit on a throne, you have to make the legs, be able to kick out more in order to get them into a sitting pose. So this change was not a bad change at all. It was actually the start of a good change for other figures to come after. And also, another cool thing here is that because this is a softer piece, for some reason, the thigh swivels work really good on this figure. So you do have really good movement here, which usually is like frozen shut for certain DC Multiverse figures. But this one, no problems at all. So, yeah. Now, when it comes to the articulation for this guy, when it comes to his torso, you do have that good rotation, leaning forward, leaning back, not the greatest. So, that's a problem. Waist articulation down here is, of course, the same. And when it comes to his legs kicking out, of course, as you saw with the other one, is the same thing as well. So most of the articulation is similar except for just a few areas, such as the head sculpt. And that's going to cover the articulation for both of these figures. And now I want to show what these figures look like when you have them set up. So let's start with the Darkseid one, because I do want to show what he looks like on the chair. And basically, the best way to set this guy up is that you just get him into a sitting pose, which is quite simple. You kind of get his legs to kick out a little bit. Then you position him. And there you go. It's really easy and simple. And he sits on this throne pretty good. You can get him to sit on it and look like he's actually sitting. And that's the benefit because of the soft plastic. Now, for the other Luthor figure, what you can do with this guy is you can get him on a flight stand. So what I tend to do with him on my shelf is that I do like the fact that, he's wearing a power suit. So if you do have these flame effects that came with like the Batman Beyond figure, what you can do here is you can take those and use it for Lex Luthor to look like he has like, flames coming out of his boosters on the bottom of his shoes, or whatever you want to call these that he's wearing. And you can pretty much have them like this, right? And then what you do is you take a flight stand, since we've gotten many flight stands in this line from certain figures, and you can just pose them like in this sort of style. So, and since he's always looking to the side, this is like the pose I tend to put him in sometimes. It really depends, but yeah, it's something like this. But yeah, that's what you can do with Lex Luthor. But again, the posing ability with these two figures really depends on how you have them posed. For this guy, because of those side eyes, it is very limiting. But for the one with the throne, yeah, most of the time I keep him on the chair. This is pretty much how he is all the time. So, and here they are together. Pretty cool. They make for good display pieces on the shelf when it comes to the DC Multiverse collection. And now, moving on to comparisons, let's start with Atomic Skull, who is a good example of a figure that came after that does reuse elements of certain parts that existed on both of these figures. And as you can see, the upper parts of his thighs, the stomach area, even parts of his arms, they're the same thing, right? Now, does it work for this character? I would say it does. It doesn't look bad on him. And in this case, when it comes to the source material, he does kind of look like he's wearing like armor parts, right? So if you're going to reuse those details that were sculpted on these two figures, this is a good way of reusing it where it doesn't feel like a bad reuse of parts. So there's this one. And then, of course, the most recent figure that came out, I would say last year, right? I think it was last year. It's been a while. It is Metallo, based on this design of Metallo. And this is the one time where the reuse is not great, because if you look at the source material that they used for this Metallo, he doesn't wear armor at all. So the choice of reusing these arms and these legs for this version of Metallo makes no sense at all to me, and it just feels very lazy, right? So there is that. And here are all four of them together, as you can see. Now let's bring in a few other figures. Let's, of course, have him next to the new 52 Cyborg Superman. And as you can see, doesn't look bad next to him. And here he is next to Superboy Prime. As you can see, Luthor is a little bit taller than Superboy Prime. But yeah, these two can work as well. And here he is next to the Eradicator. That's another good one right there. And let's have him, of course, next to Steel. Hopefully he stands. Okay, do not fall. Okay, there we go. And last but not least, let's have him next to the Silver Age Superman. And I would say these two go nicely together on the shelf right here, right? You want Superman fighting Lex Luthor in that classic sort of way. Well, there you go. These two versions could definitely work together on the shelf. And that is going to be all the comparisons for today's video. And if you found today's double review, or whatever you want to call this, informative, do give this video a like. If you want to subscribe to the channel for more action figure content and whatever else I do on here, it would be much appreciated. And with that said, take care, and I will see you in the next video.